Hey there guys, and welcome to another video on object orientation in Python 3. And in this video we're going to discuss the use of the property decorator here and how to use properties in your classes. Just before we start, if these videos are helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. We generally put out 2 or 3 videos a week, so if you like these kind of bite-sized videos on just random topics in Python, then yeah, that'll be great. Thanks very much. So to discuss this and show you its use case, I'm going to show you probably would be a fairly unconventional way. I'm going to show you a problem first, and then show you how that problem is solved by using these. It was a way I was taught years ago, and I think it's quite useful. So I'm going to do this via a simple student class. So this student class has an initialization method, which don't forget is called when you first make an instance, so on line 13. To make a student, we need a name and a department, so we pass in John and science. So self.name is going to basically say John's name attribute is John. This is going to say John's department attribute is science. And then we have this kind of funky f-string thing here. This basically says John's email attribute is a combination of the lowercase name dot the lowercase department dot, well, sorry, no dot, at college.edu here. So if we go ahead and just print underneath john.email, just like that, we should see that it kind of combines these and sticks them into this string here. And there we have it. Now, let me show you a problem with this. So let's suppose John wants to change from science into, say, computing, which would be a good call. So let's do john.department as equal to, let's say, computing. So what we'd want in an ideal world is the email to now say, you know, john.computing. So from john.science to john.computing, but it doesn't. So that's kind of strange, right? So let's go and just check the actual attribute has changed. Let's print john.department. Yeah, so that's interesting. Why would this say john.science and department says computing, but the email has department inside it? Now, the answer to this is quite interesting. It's all to do with when this method is called. So whenever you create an instance, so in this case, line 13, quite a number of things happen behind the scenes. So we have the new dunder method is called, which sets up the object in memory, and etc. It then goes off and calls init. So this is called for. That's why we can't see any like explicit call to this. This is done for you behind the scenes. So line 13 comes along, makes a student, init is called, so all of this stuff happens from line 13 effectively. So if you think of it this way, this is basically saying the email is whatever the name and department was when it was created. So because we passed in John and science at the start, that's what it's stuck as. You could potentially come along and change it, so you could do something really nasty, and I don't know, you could hate yourself and do something like this and change it like that by putting, yeah, but that's not going to be ideal. So in an ideal world, what we'd want is for us to be able to say, okay, John's had a department or a name change, so therefore the email should update by itself every time. And that is where the property comes in. Now, to show how property works, I'm going to do a like-for-like swap. So I'm going to swap this instance attribute into a property. So let's get this blanked off for a second to make sure I'll blank this off as well so it doesn't complain. And what I'm going to do is just build it up piece by piece, because these look a little bit like methods to begin with. In fact, we can build it as a method first to make it interesting. So I'm going to steal this, because I'm too lazy to type it out twice. And then I'm going to say def email self return that f string from earlier. And all I'm going to do here is do self.name.lower, self.department.lower. And don't forget, whenever we call up a instance method, self always gets passed as the variable. So if we did john.email, in this case, self is going to refer back to John, the variable. So self.name.lower just means John's name, lowered case, John's department, lowered case. So if we go ahead and do, remove this for the time being, we go ahead and said print john.email. Because it's a method, we need to call it, so you need your parentheses here. This is going to pass John as self, of course, so let's give that a try. There we go. Now let's do this here. Now let's do john.department equals computing. And there we go. So we're halfway there. We can see this changing now, but we're calling it as if it's a method, which is not ideal, because if this is like it's not a method in the fact that it's doing something. It's just returning a bit of information, and generally your methods shouldn't do that. Your methods want to be doing some kind of computation or some kind of task or calculation. So this is okay. It's valid syntax, but it's not ideal. What we want to do is turn this into a property so that we can actually call it like that. So we can say, what's John's email? Because if you do something like this, it might imply that this is a method that's doing some sort of task. Like if I was to see this for the first time, I might think that this is a piece of code sending an email, and that's probably not ideal. So if I do this here, we get this. So it's not quite working yet. All we need to do is stick on a property decorator. Now if you hit run, there we go. Easy, good to go. Basically what this is, an easy way of thinking about this, I like to think of all this does effectively is turn a method into an attribute. It's more complex than that, of course, but that's what I like to think of it doing. It effectively says, take this method and make it behave just like an attribute. So see how when I do John.name, look at how I'm calling them both. I'm asking for John's name attribute, and then I'm calling the email property here. But look at that, they look exactly the same. So when I call them, John.computing, absolutely fine. If I remove this here, goes back to the original, that's fine. And basically, the reason why this works so well is because this is not tied to the init method. This is basically called every time you physically go ahead and call it here. So if I do John.email right at the start, it's going to concern itself with John and science. Then if we change to computing in the middle and then call it email again, it's going to then take John computing. So let's try both. And there we go here. John.science. We then update it, call it again, and we get John.computing. And there we go. So in a nutshell, that's how a property works. And generally a good rule of thumb for using these, I always think, if I'm doing some kind of combination of attributes, so whether it's like first name dot last name, in this case I've done name dot department, but it can be whatever you want, any kind of information or attribute which is made up of multiple attributes where one of them might change through the line. In this case, department changed halfway through the program, so therefore this string that consisted of name and department, that's now in a bad place. So in that situation, give yourself a property. It's a nice, simple way of returning data that is accurate and reflects what's happening in the rest of the class. If you like this, guys, thanks very much. Feel free to hit like and subscribe. And if you go to my About section, I'm also running a Python daily tip on Instagram. So it's a bite-sized piece of information about Python every day. I've been doing it for a couple of months now. Cheers for watching, guys, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.